I think we probably should start. Okay, so I will call to order the school committee meeting of Thursday, January 7th, 2016. As a reminder, this meeting is televised and recorded. And if you would like to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so the purpose of this meeting, this meeting was conceived to answer questions of parents in the community who had concerns related to class size and some monetary concerns related to budgeting and allocation of funds. So I would like to start by saying that the kindergarten tuition is added into a revolving account, okay? The purpose of the revolving account, it's not like a regular budgeted item where you fill a bucket with money and you expend it all down until it's gone. The purpose of the revolving account is to put monies in and always have money at the ready to cover your costs. So that's just a little bit of an entry into the discussion, okay? So I had taken a copy of what you read at a previous meeting in December, and I put my comments and answers, our comments and answers actually, to all of your questions. So if you'd like, we can go through it one by one, and then you can ask questions.
I think that's probably helpful. I brought copies for the audience
Okay.
as well, for people who
All right.
haven't had a chance to read it or want to ask questions.
Excuse my cough. Okay, so I'm gonna skip the first couple of paragraphs and go right to the question section, okay? So you were wondering about determining the appropriate student-teacher ratios. And I wanted to explain there are several factors that are taken into consideration when determining class size. Oh, we didn't take a roll call, I'm sorry.
Okay.
That was silly. Okay. Attendance, sorry.
Present Katie Dugan.
Present Gina Stino.
Present Mary McGoldrick.
Present Ellen Mar.
You'd think since we just did it last night.
Carries over, doesn't it?
Sorry.
We needed Barb here to say aye.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. So there are several factors that are taken into consideration when determining class size. Those factors include, but are not limited to, language in the teacher contract with recommended class sizes, and that language is in the pending contract as well as all previous contracts.
And you're not able to speak to whether that's changing or remaining consistent?
I don't think it's changed.
Okay.
I think it's the same, right? It hasn't changed.
Up until this point, I don't think we can comment.
We can't, but that is like one thing in the contract that isn't changing this time.
There you
Okay?
go.
So the sizes there haven't gone up, haven't come down, they've stayed stable. Okay. Language in the teacher contract recommending class sizes. Another tool in determining class size is our accreditation by NAEYC. And that's the National Association for Education of Young Children. Okay? They come in, and so it's an organization that makes recommendations based on what they see in our district and best practices in others. So they come in and they do a very detailed assessment of what's going on in the buildings, and then they make recommendations. And a third factor will soon come into play as the state is working on establishing standards and parameters in this arena. So that will be interesting to see that unfold and see what their recommendations are.
Do you have any idea what, sorry, Amanda's on 3847. Do you have any idea what the time frame is for when that will?
I don't.
No.
I just learned about that this week. Okay? I had not heard of that before, but I just learned about it. And it probably all ties into the core curriculum and the standards and all of that. So I really don't know. So you also requested clarity regarding the funding and general budget for the kindergarten classes. First, the recent
Are we off of one? There's another part to question one, so we're going in order, about the specific decision-making timeline?
Yeah, decision-making timeline. We'll go back to that.
Okay.
Okay? I'd rather get most of the questions answered, and we can go back to that and have kind of a philosophical conversation about that.
Okay, I didn't know if you were going in order.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Recent kindergarten invoices that were sent out are a clear reminder that we pay tuition for kindergarten. How are these funds utilized? Our peer districts seem to be moving away from kindergarten tuition. What is Cohasset's plan for maintaining or ending kindergarten tuition? That's a big question, okay? Because we're really not able to absorb that cost right now. It is a huge cost, and you'll see that further along in the comments that I make, because we do have detail on what a majority of the revolving fund is used for, okay? So we're not able to do this at this time, and I'm not sure when this might happen due to the size of our town, limited tax base. It's all stuff that you ladies have heard over the last several meetings as we've entered the budget season. Kindergarten tuition is a reality for the foreseeable future. Okay. Second, in terms of present kindergarten cohort, the fiscal budget for this year was based on a projected kindergarten cohort size of 91 full-time students, yielding tuition funding of $273. The actual enrollment for this year is 108. And I put a little qualifier in there that this number actually shifted down a bit, and it was 103 full-day students and 3 half-day students. But that has also changed after the first of the year. A couple of those students opted in for full day for the second part of the year.
So what's our full day as of January?
Yep.
What is it now?
I believe it's 106.
106 full day.
Yep. Okay. And then you also said, resulting in $39,000 in tuition above what was projected and budgeted. Where has this $39,000 gone? Oh. Part of my comments went away. Do you have it? Okay, thank you. So some kindergarten entry and services are required by the state. They're served by IEPs. That has become another unfunded mandate for school districts. We can't really discuss the details of that because it deals with special ed laws, and that's confidential. So some of the students who are in the classes are getting services that are required under their IEPs. So that's not an easy question to answer, okay?
Can I ask you?
Yep.
So meaning that K tuition is being used to fund special ed services for kindergartners?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Third, the budget also includes an additional line item for full-day kindergarten enhancement grant. Late summer state legislation was passed providing $37,000 to the school. Has this money been spent? If so, how? When that money was first allocated, it was kind of a little bit of a slippery slope because we were up $37,000 and then the governor came, the election came, that money was cut, we didn't know what we were going to get. Thankfully, it was restored. So that money has been used and allocated to cover ESP salaries. What?
No, my
Oh,
phone just
oh.
buzzed. I just, sorry.
I thought you went,
No, just my phone said nothing.
It was a phone
Sorry.
noise, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, this amount covers less than 2 of these full-time salaries. Okay. Additionally, the budget passed in March for fiscal year 2016 allocated funding for 6 kindergarten teachers, 5 full-time and 1 half-time position. Since only 5 teachers were funded, where did the funds for the half-time position go? Half of all kindergarten teacher salaries are funded via the regular operating budget. The other half come from the kindergarten revolving account. Half the yearly salary allocation for kindergarten teachers this year totals $205,000. When only 3 students signed up for the half-day kindergarten, a plan was formulated to place those 3 children appropriately in the full-day classrooms for part of the day. The half-time salary was returned to the operating budget for teachers needed at other levels due to needs based in increased numbers. The next item, given that funding was provided for a sixth kindergarten teacher, that money was provided for the kindergarten in the form of full-day kindergarten enhancement grant. And that the kindergarten parents pay tuition, we asked you to research making the funds available immediately to hire at a minimum an additional aide for the kindergarten this year to begin at the return of school in January. I'm not gonna read the rest of it because it all deals with that position. And as you, I believe, already know, we have advertised and are interviewing candidates that will allow for an ESP in each kindergarten classroom. We received 12 applications. From those 12 applications, we identified 8 very good candidates. 5 of the candidates responded to our invitation to interview, and 2 of the 5 opted to remain where they were and not change jobs. Mr. LeCount has been interviewing the remaining 3 candidates and will have a decision soon. Done.
When will they be in the classrooms?
Would have to be next week.
One would be next week, and the other would be likely 2 weeks to give notice.
Okay?
We have to cover fingerprinting and all the details, and
Yep.
it generally takes a few days.
Yeah, there's a lot of paperwork involved, Corey checks and various things that you would want to happen before these people are placed in your children's classrooms. Okay. In closing, we would also like to state for the record that we insist that a sixth teacher be maintained for the first grade for the 2016-17 school year, and that ideally we would like to see the addition of a seventh teacher. In the first grade, was that first grade, or was,
Yes.
we were thinking that
Going into first grade.
going into first grade, as enrollment for next year is expected to rise, and we can speak to that afterwards. I'm just going through all the different bullet points, Bob, and then we'll open it up for discussion, okay? Okay. As announced in the last school committee meeting in the FY17 budget overview, according to current enrollment projections, there will be 6 teachers in each grade level at the Osgood School for next school year. We had already planned that before this question even came up. Okay, and that's what I just said in the next line. While these concerns affect our children immediately, they speak to larger questions regarding Cohasset's standards of excellence in education. We would like to see the Cohasset School Committee develop a governing philosophy with a specific focus on class size that would allow for the maintenance and enhancement of Cohasset's educational quality, keeping the best interests of children as the priority. And the school committee wants to assure you that the best interests of our children are always at the forefront. That never wavers, particularly at this table. Again, there's contract language around suggested class size that's supported by the administration and the teachers, and we committed to an accreditation process that was well regarded and rigorous. It was done by a recognized organization making recommendations based on best practices in this regard, and many others. So that was the end of your formal questions. I'm sure you probably have a list of others.
I think clarification, so Bianca Bersani, Corey, for staff. I think to start with some clarifications of what you went through, I think perhaps most concerning to us is the idea that for months on end, when the budget was being set last year, there were 5.5 kindergarten teachers allocated. And there are continual discussions throughout the spring and into summer about the concern with the growth of that kindergarten cohort. And with projections coming off of the census and other projections that had been done, we were having a very hard time going back in the minutes and also in the videos, figuring out when in the process that 5th or 6th teacher, the halftime teacher, was cut. And if the justification is because of large class sizes, we left kindergarten class sizes with upwards of 23 students, which is the maximum. And at least going back the last 2 years, there's discussion by members of the school committee, as well as the superintendent, as well as the principal, that the goal is to actually keep kindergarten classrooms at less than 20 students. And so that is perhaps where we're confused with the timeline. When did that decision get made? Was it in a school committee meeting? And if school or classroom class sizes were the ultimate priority, why was it okay to have a class size at kindergarten of 23 students? And they range 21 to 23, so it's, that is a low tuition for budgeting, right? So there was an extra windfall for students coming in.
I have to
Did get the
stop you
grant
on
back.
that, I have to stop you on that, but, because that extra windfall isn't really a windfall, okay? There are other factors besides teacher salaries that are covered by your
Oh,
tuition.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
you can't just say, oh, well, there's an extra $100,000 there. It doesn't really work like that.
Certainly, but we're not adding a massive load like another teacher,
Mhm.
right? So it's proportionally, it
And
evens out.
we can't pay teacher salaries completely out of that.
Yes.
So, it's not legal.
You can pay it out of tuition, but not.
Half.
We can only pay
Like
the
half.
portion that's not covered in the budget,
Yep.
okay? So only half can be paid
And
from
we
the
have,
revolving account.
and we have to cover the half day.
Yes, yep.
That
That's clear.
has to be budgeted. It cannot come out of tuition.
And so when did the, discussion take place then regarding cutting that teacher for kindergarten?
I think that it happened when we saw that there were just 3 students in that half-day class.
But why wasn't the thought at that point, let's keep this half to, or even bump up into a full-time teacher and divide those kids by the 6 classes instead of forcing them into larger classes with 5 teachers?
That would have made for an inordinately small class size. You know, I mean,
Well, it would have
No.
put them still about 19 kids a class, right? I mean, do the math, but it would have moved.
Which is not inordinately small. I think that's the goal, the language that everybody has stated is the goal, under 20.
So somebody made, Nathan Redmond, 44 staff, somebody made a decision to say, let's just drop that half teacher, put all the kids into 5 classes, keep it at 21 and 23 or whatever the numbers are, rather than making that half-day teacher a full-time teacher and, actually lowering the class size to something that is, more palatable to the parents.
can you speak to how many students were in each of the kindergarten classes after the shift was made? After the half-day teacher left? We had that, information and I don't,
I have current information.
okay.
I can give you that.
Okay.
Currently, there's, one class has 20, is this what you want?
Okay,
Yes.
we have one class with 20, one class with 22, one class with 21, another class with 22, and another class with 21.
And my daughter's 23 class just lost a student, so that's why it's down to 22.
Right.
So
Okay.
up until now, it's 23.
All right,
Which is the
so it's-
contractual maximum for that.
So it's still a reasonable class size, particularly if there is.
Nathan, why do you say that's reasonable? I mean, I think that's extremely high for kindergarten. Now, you say you had an accredited, your accreditation company come in. What is their recommendation? Did they produce a report that's available to the public that we
They
can
do-
show that says
they-
23 students is?
They do produce a report, and is 23 the threshold, or is it 24?
23 is their maximum.
Okay.
Right, so it's their
From
maximum, but
NAUIC.
not their, it's not their, did they actually produce something that said, here is what our recommendation is, but don't ever go above 23. But really, for best student outcomes, you should have, 17.
And I've not
Did they
read
produce anything
that.
like that? Because if you're going off of, what the maximum is, then, yeah, that's great, that's the maximum. We're in Cohasset because we strive to be better. We don't wanna push to the maximum and just say, because that's what somebody else allows. We wanna be as good as we can be. So why do we say 23 is okay, when somebody could've made the decision and said, let's make this 6 and then have, 18 and 19 students in the classroom?
Where can people find that report?
If you were to go, or just go to the NAUIC, National Association for the Education of Young Children, they have guidelines all listed on their website. Their website's a little bit cumbersome, but you can find it. And they don't have a recommended average size. They set a maximum size. That's what they do on their website. Class sizes vary. They work all throughout the country, so they don't say an average, they say max.
So I have a question, it's Kristen Fraser, 16 Hemlock Way, and I'm confused because we went to a reduced class size and we didn't have full-time ESP support.
support, yet we had that extra $37,000 that was allocated for a little less than 2 ESP salaries. So we lost a kindergarten classroom teacher, and we didn't have full ESP support. Just seems like a double whammy.
Well, that was a decision that was made by the administration, you know, not to have full-time, to have an ESP in every classroom for every minute of the day. As I explained in my response to, I believe it was Mrs. Zani, I have always supported that concept. I think that it's very important in a kindergarten classroom to have a second adult. And we've headed in that direction now. We've corrected that situation. There is full-time support in each kindergarten classroom coming up. And that will be in place through the end of this year. And then through the budget process, we are reassessing that for next year, not whether or not there's a need, but how many would be needed. Okay, that's part of the whole budget process. Yes.
Megan Morisky, 11 Sankey Road. You know, I understand that there's a concern here with this year, but I think that we do have to look at the big picture.
Oh, absolutely.
Moving forward. I am a proud graduate of Cohasset High School, and I always grew up with the numbers really small. And, you know, I'm sitting among quite a few people here who moved back because of the schools, and, you know, that is where we need to really look at where we're going. You know, you have all these people who just love this town, and they wanna make it the best, and they've experienced such a great, education here. You know, my daughter last year in kindergarten, she was fortunate to be in a class size of 16, and the other kindergarten classes had about an average of 19 at the max. Growing up, I was in 8th grade, I remember my social studies class as, you know, 8 children. No more than 16 in the class, and I know our numbers are getting higher. But we need to look at what we can do to keep that quality of education. You know, I graduated with many students that went to Harvard and Yale and all these wonderful schools, and you look around and we want that for our children, and it starts really early. Kindergarten, we have kids that have never been to school. They've, you know, some of them still need help in the bathroom. So to put 23 children, you know, if you look at a teacher's lesson plan, and I am a teacher, so I can say this, in kindergarten, they have to plan every, like, 20 minutes. They need movement breaks, you know, 23 little bodies in a classroom. It doesn't help the instructor, it doesn't help the children, and you have to look at the goals that they need to meet now with reading and writing and math. And that's a lot of expectation, and then you have parents who have no idea. They get home from work and, you know, they don't know what the dibbles, they don't know any of this educational, you know, vocabulary, and we're assessing them early. We need to keep these class sizes smaller. So I ask, let's look at this year, but let's think far ahead. You know, what's it gonna be in 5 years as we continue to grow? And we've got all these developments. You know, are we ready? It doesn't seem like we are. So I second, and I'm sure that I have about 20 that will agree with me that we need to put in a plan for the future, not just right now.
And
That's
we
what's happened.
recognize that, we do understand that, and we had a discussion at last night's meeting that the projections for enrollment next year are actually going down. So we have ebbs and flows.
It does, yeah.
You know, and it's very difficult to budget with that. It's very difficult to budget when people don't fill out the census and tell us how many children are coming into the district. We have people who don't list their children on the census at all. We have all raised or are raising children in this district, and I assure you, I'm sure that we all agree that the education of our children is
Oh, and I know you do,
utmost
and I
importance
really do respect what you do,
to all
but
of us.
I think that we just need to, as a whole, as a community, I think that maybe, and even this meeting, you know, we kind of found out, some of us last minute, and I think that maybe it should be, you know, just more of a concern in the town, and I know that you all work really hard, and you volunteer your time, and you're here, and you're, you know, it's a constant, discussion, and I know that you all have had, you know, children, and you're part of this community, and you want the best as well, but I think that we need to really keep that in mind when it starts so early, this learning. It's a lot different in the last 5 to 8 years with all these benchmarks and the assessment. We need to look at where the children are missing. It's said, you know, they miss the boat when it's young and they're not getting all these, core goals in 5, 6, 7 years old. They're missing it, you know, they've missed that window of opportunity. So I think instead of keep cutting the preschool, you know, last year it was the preschool and, you know, teacher, and this year it's kindergarten. I think we've gotta kind of look at where the need is and where we can make this such a valuable component to their long-term learning, and where it really matters is in the beginning, you know, not that it's not important in high school or anything, but we have to look at where the beginning is.
Oh, I understand
you know?
that, and that's the foundation for learning for their entire school career. I understand that completely. You know, that's when they start to read, and that impacts their learning for the rest of their school career. So we take all of these things into consideration. But again, this town is small. We have little to no industry. We have 2 grocery stores. You know, we're hopeful that the meals and room tax will pass the next time it's on the agenda, because that will bring the town even more money, and we can participate in the benefits of that. So we're looking for all different ways to get more money in to the town's tax base so that we can share in that. It's a difficult conversation, a very difficult conversation. Last night we had a conversation about how did the 61-39 split come into play? And it was after years and years and years of literally fighting for between the town and the schools to make sure that all of the needs were met. And, you know, it seemed at the time that 61-39 was equitable. Maybe it's not, maybe it is. You know, that's a philosophical discussion that has to happen between the town and the schools. And I don't know that it will change.
So Nathan Redmond, 44 SAP. So I totally agree with you that that's a conversation that has to be had, you know, with the school committee and the town. Is the school committee actively pursuing to get a bigger share of the pot from the selectmen to say, you know, in order to maintain the quality of schools that everybody moves to this town for, and which all keeps our property values higher, and, you know, we strive to be, you know, a good school district, that we need more of that pot. We need 63%, you know, and we need to address this every few years. We can't just have a static number that is fixed, that we just live with. So are you guys advocating for more money?
I'm gonna let Katie respond to this because she and Mary are, okay.
Oh, no, I'm just moving paper around now.
Okay, organizing the notes.
Yeah.
She and Mary are on the Budget and Finance Subcommittee of the school committee and have participated in a variety of meetings.
So, just stepping back, and this may be repeat for some of you, but, Massachusetts law has a cap on, tax revenue growth at 2.5%. So, our town, over 80% of our revenue that comes into town is from our real estate tax levy, of which, over 90% is, residential. So, we're very tied to our tax levy as relates to, residential income. So we've got a top line that is capped at 2.5% under Prop 2.5, and we have expenses in varying categories that grow higher than that. To take an example, salaries, which are about 80% of our expenses, historically have grown anywhere from 4.5% to 5.5%, and that's market for teachers. And we, as a committee, have done a lot of work to benchmark what is fair and equitable pay for our teachers. We've worked very hard to settle the contract, and God willing, we will settle that very soon. But one of the things that this town faces is a disconnect between our cap, which is our revenue, which is growing at 2.5%, and our major expense on the school side, which is growing at call it 5%. In addition to that, other major expenses to the town are health insurance, and unfortunately, our health insurance has been growing at north of 6%. In fact, for next year, they're forecasting 10%. So we've been pinched by our expenses and our revenue line. In addition to that, we have a financial management policy that was put in place that splits to 61-39. The reality is that the school committee does advocate. 2 years ago, the school committee advocated for we're going through a process right now, reviewing our budget and trying to figure out what is the level that we can actually, come up with as a recommendation. That's likely to be higher than what the town is recommending in terms of the 61-39 split. We are going to have to advocate to the Board of Selectmen, we're gonna have to advocate to the advisory committee, but ultimately, it comes down to town meeting as a legislature. So if people are passionate about this, if the school committee does come forward with a recommendation for a school budget that is higher than what is being recommended by the town manager, it goes to town meeting. And ultimately, people have to literally be there May 2nd on the floor to vote, because if it doesn't pass, it comes back to the school committee to make cuts. We will advocate to the Board of Selectmen once we settle on what our recommended budget is. They ultimately have fiduciary duty for the total town. They will take a vote on the recommended budget that the school committee puts forward. There's 4 selectmen currently, and that vote will go into the town warrant, and it will be indicator to the rest of town as to how the Board of Selectmen is feeling relative to that budget. In addition, we have an advisory committee, which is made up of 9, I believe, that is also gonna take a vote on the school budget, and that vote will also go into the town warrant. So those 2 constituencies, the Board of Selectmen and advisory, are absolutely on our radar screen, and we advocate every year to those. But it comes down to town meeting, and it comes down to people showing up at town meeting and voting. Parents in town are only 30% of the voting population, and we have, unfortunately, a horrible track record of showing up. There's baseball, there's tons of other conflicts. So the biggest thing that I can recommend is doing what a lot of you are already doing, and I did myself, frankly, 2 years ago, which is getting involved, understand the bigger picture of the town's finances, because we do have a limited tax base, but get out there and advocate. I used public comment period at Board of Selectmen very effectively last year to express, or 2 years ago to express how I was feeling about the pinch on the budget. You can use public comment period at the school committee. You can speak to advisory committee if you have concerns. All of that helps us as we advocate during the budget cycle. But ultimately, it comes down to town meeting and the legislature. The community as the legislature to appropriate.
Maybe this isn't an appropriate topic for this
Yeah.
this meeting, but do you know if are we at the levy limit, or how close are we to the levy ceiling that we have?
We increase it 2.5%,
Right,
every year.
Every year.
So the town could, force an override of some, hundreds of thousands of dollars if we wanted to go over and above what the levy ceiling is. But, you're still limited in terms of how high you can grow, but that gives you some wiggle room. I'm just wondering if that process is feasible with where we are. Maybe you don't know that.
The problem with doing that is it adds to your base, and it only solves your problem for 1 year. You have to keep doing it over and over and over again, and you folks won't be able to stay here, your taxes will go so through the roof.
So,
It's really, it's a balancing act on all of it.
so the, when it comes to when you look at how the town constructs the top line, the revenues, what they do is they look at the last year's total taxes and increase it by 2.5%, and that's kind of the beginning balance for what's being projected for fiscal 17. They also look at new growth in the town, and although we see a lot of things happening, I drive down Forest and I see 3 new lots happening, that does factor into new growth. I'll tell you that it's only $400,000 that the town is projecting in new growth revenue from taxes, and part of it is that when you see some of the construction happening, the value of the real estate was already on the tax roll, so that the increase that you get when you put a property on there, obviously it increases the value of it, but it's not like it's gone from 0 to 2 million. It goes up maybe half of that. So we do see new growth. So we're increasing at 2.5%. I will tell you that in this community there is a cohort of and voice in the community that actually wants to reduce our tax, levy increases from 2.5 to less.
two.
To 2 or less.
Or less.
So we have a very diverse community, and there are folks in town that would actually like to see us, reduce the tax, increases from 2.5 to something less than that. That being said, you can, there are two types of overrides. There's an operating expense override, and there is a debt override. Generally debt override is done for capital issues, new school roof, school buildings, town hall, if we ever decide to do that. There are also operating overrides. The last time that was attempted, it failed. If you look at the last time it failed in 2006 or 2007, and you read the reasons it failed, and you reflect on the community at large in terms of the financial management policies, and frankly, some of the financial crises that this community has gone through, I think, from my perspective, unfortunately, we're not in a place yet where an override is going to pass. An override has to come from the Board of Selectmen. It can't be citizen petition. We can petition for an underride, but that's not what I want. So it's gonna have to come from the Board of Selectmen, and it's gonna have to be a clear community voice that says, we wanna increase, our taxes. And I honestly don't believe we're there yet, but I do believe that we have a Board of Selectmen and a town manager that are willing to work with us. And so if we do, get to a point where we're being pinched, we might have to go in that direction, but I don't think that's this year.
Amanda Zani, 38 Forest Ave. As we've been kind of doing some of our research, we've started to really take a look at some of the performance on MCAS over the past couple of years. And I don't know if you guys have broken it down at all by grades. And taken a look at what our math scores have been like.
Do you want this to start?
Some of the classes, you know, at the Deer Hill have been getting pretty large. I know the middle school has some pretty large class sizes now. Those kids came out of Deer Hill, upwards of like 25 kids in the class, 24
That was
kids.
my daughter's class. And she
It was, yes.
academically successful.
And I know you had the same conversation, Katie, 2 years ago with the school committee. So here we are, fast forward 2 years later. You are welcome to review some of the diagrams that are on there in terms of MCAS scores, in math and science particularly, across the district. So at what point do we say, I understand the budget problems, I understand we're in a tough spot, but when we're at 25, 26 kids, or in a class, and I'm not talking about kindergarten, I'm talking about for some of the older grades, we're at the maximums, we have more kids possibly coming into the system. At what point do we start trying to alleviate it, add a teacher for a grade, or, you know, the third grade's gonna be 24 kids, and fourth grade's gonna be 20, and fifth grade's gonna be 20. How do we make it fair to the third graders that are gonna be in a class of 24 or 25 kids next year? I mean, I understand there's limitations, we have to work towards a solution as a group, but we also have to recognize that there's a problem, at least in terms of how parents are viewing it, with class size. And I think it's affecting our performance, which, you know, I gave you some
Over
graphs
the
to look at.
over the last couple of years, we have added half-time teachers to cover a variety of subjects. We've added full-time teachers to cover a variety of subjects. Last night's assumptions included more math and science. You know, we understand
Well, that was at
what's
the
needed
high
and where.
school level.
Yes, but.
Which
but
is already, the high school already has funded $2
But-
million more annually than Osgood or Deer Hill. Their budget's about $5 million, ours is.
Yeah, they have
Yeah.
more teachers.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, they have
But
more
Yeah.
teachers because of the content
our younger
areas.
kids have
Right.
needs too, so.
Well, the content areas and also the structure of the school day
Right.
So,
requires that.
you know, I've had this conversation. I was on the Deer Hill School Committee with Dr. DiChiara for 2 years. Honestly, I personally rely on the administrators and their recommendations, and I think Dr. DiChiara in particular speaks very eloquently and passionately about the fact that class size is one of the considerations, but ultimately is not the only consideration that she looks at, and she is very comfortable operating classes between, 20 to 26. my daughter's class grew from, she was in that 1920 all the way up to 25, and along the way, it was, the administrators in those buildings were comfortable and providing academic success for that cohort. And I think that Dr. DiChiara and the other principals are the ones that we look to in terms of what is that right balance. And I know that the third grade class is gonna have 24 students in it. But if you look back historically over the last 10 years, we've had, 4 out of the 10 years where there's been class sizes of in that range. And there's not a single point at which, if you talk to the administrators, that it becomes a tipping point. They look at paraprofessional support, they look at teaching strategies, they look at professional development, and ultimately it's one of the factors, but Dr. DiChiara will also tell you that when she looks at the schedule, maintaining 6 teachers per grade level allows her to do other stuff with her staff that she values in terms of common planning time, that she thinks drives academic success. And so she balances all of that. And so ultimately, when the administrators come, we look at the recommendations that they're making. And Dr. DiChiara is recommending 6 for next year for 3rd grade. And we'll have a conversation with her on the 20th about how comfortable is she? What concerns does she have? What else does she need in order to be successful academically?
When you look at the historical MCAS data that's there, our scores, if you look, in math are going down, in science are going down, and the problem with that, although I agree, I trust her judgment, but our scores are not great. There's a delay when the class sizes are larger. We have like a 14-month delay between when kids take classes, and when they're taking classes, when they take the tests, and then when reporting happens, to even begin to understand how the effect of large classes is impacting them. And it's just, looking at MCAS scores is only one judgment point to look at in terms of student success, and I recognize that. But it's, a point of data that we can access, and that gives you kind of some touch points of how the grades are doing. And I just, go ahead.
If I could just interject a
Yes.
second. Just to the first point, and to dovetail on what Katie was saying, I believe it was February 26, 2014, I pointed you to that meeting. You can YouTube. The superintendent had all the administrators come and speak specifically to their building philosophy based on their age population for class size, and they all speak very eloquently about it. And I would really encourage you to YouTube that and look at it. I reviewed it again just last week in preparation for this meeting tonight. It gives you a much greater understanding and all the things that go into their decision-making process in terms of class size, because you could have one class size of 24 with a student dynamic that's just fine, and one of 19 that has a whole bunch of other things going on where you might need more help in it. So there's a lot of variables.
What was the date of that meeting again, Mary?
February 26, 2014. And at our next school committee meeting on January 20th, the principals will be here talking about their line item budget, and while it won't specifically be speaking to class size, that will certainly be an opportunity to ask some more specific questions about that and what they've requested for this coming year. The other thing I just wanted to clarify was this past year, and this is something we've been talking about for some time, we have started to develop an internal report card, and we've done a lot of our own benchmarking to look at our own progress on MCAS and SATs and a whole variety of other things internally. Ellen has really done a tremendous amount of work on this. So this is something that we pay a lot of attention to. We rely on Louise Demas, who's the Assistant Superintendent and Director of Curriculum, to help us understand if a math score dips, it is actually most likely due to the fact that they brought in Envision Math, which is a new curriculum, and it takes a couple of years for the teachers, the students, and everybody to adapt to a new program. So there's more involved than the number of students in the chairs in the classroom. It's a very complicated puzzle, and I'm not sure when she's doing her MCAS.
She's coming next.
On the 20th as well?
It's the 20th or the first week in February to check.
I would bring a picnic lunch, because it's gonna be a long meeting, but there will be a lot of really, really good information in there, I think, that will help shine some light on this whole situation. So I just wanted to,
And one of the things that she does do is she looks longitudinally at the class she looks at the class of 2022 and how they've done in 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and 6th grade. So she does, along with the, each grade level, looks longitudinally at how those classes are doing. And I know that we all wonder what they do on the half days, but that is absolutely what they're doing. There's 2 things that they're doing on half days. They're reviewing data exactly like that and understanding what is happening in that particular grade level, and they will go through a process of reviewing MCAS and other data. And they also do a lot of curriculum development, so.
They map the curriculum so that they can target the areas that need the most work and others that don't need as much work, and
So there's a lot, I have a lot of trust in, our assistant superintendent and, the work that she's done around curriculum, our building principals, and frankly, our teachers. They're all very data-driven, and they are all very focused on curriculum, and they're all very collaborative at a grade level, and that's one of the things that, I know I appreciate when Dr. DeCara talks about why she has stuck to a 6-6-6, structure at Deer Hill in particular, is to allow that common bonding time and that collaboration, because she thinks it really drives outcomes. And so if you change it to optimize one aspect in terms of class size, you compromise something else from her perspective, and she does, to this point, she has chosen not to compromise that. She thinks she gets better outcomes. And again.
yes.
Bianca Bersani, 44 staff. So just to be clear, the members of the school committee were satisfied with 22 and 23 class size for kindergarten for this year.
It would not be, I don't have a problem with 22 students in a kindergarten class if there's a second adult in the room, as I've stated on many occasions, not just this year. So, you brought this to the forefront. We've corrected that for this year. Hopefully, going forward, we will continue to strive to do that. We would love the class sizes to go down. We have 6 kindergarten teachers scheduled on the agenda for next year, so we're hopeful we will not be having this conversation again. Let's just say that.
This again, because it's still not clear when the decision came and who made that decision to cut the kindergarten teacher this year. Again, we have tried to do our due diligence, and I've looked through meeting minutes, and I've tried to watch video, and it's very hard to find, so I'm not sure where the discussion took place. But the decision was made in order to help another grade, and we're not sure where that grade was, in
Well, the
terms of their
decision
class
wasn't
size.
made to help another grade. The decision was made because there were only 3 half-day children
Oh, I
enrolled.
thought that you said at the beginning of this meeting that it was because of other moving class sizes
Right,
somewhere else.
so it made sense to the administration to use that teacher salary, or that portion of a teacher's salary, to mitigate a larger class size at a different level.
And I think that this, you know,
And you're asking us for that, you're asking us for a specific answer that we don't have, that was developed by the administration. So, I would have to have Mrs. Cataldo answer that question.
What's the month of May?
In May?
It was in May.
Okay, so we knew that there would only be 3 students in the half-day as of May.
As of May, that's all we have. Yes, we watched it, let me rephrase it, we began the discussion in May, it was probably concluded in June. We talked about it for 3 to 4 weeks.
And I think we had more, I think there was still some folks.
There were 5 half-days at the time.
There was still more folks, but they weren't certain whether they were going to go half-day or full days. They had committed to half-day. So there was more than, we were higher than that, I think I can remember meeting in our conference room, there were probably 6 folks that we met with, and I'm working from memory here, but I'd say 6 at that point, that we knew committed to half-day. Some were still not certain. Then during the summer, they changed their mind, and a couple of them went to full day.
So as of May, that was when the school committee had their major discussion, because they needed 2 new second grade teachers for the cohort, because that was a very, very large cohort. And there was a discussion, Ms. Cataldo, you put before the school committee, as to whether you wanted to use that seemingly perhaps extra kindergarten position to hire the second grade majority of the members on the school committee said no, that they wanted to hire the 2 sixth grade teachers and not have any last minute problems. So as of May, the 5.5 kindergarten teachers is still in there, still budgeted for, it's still in the discussion. So I just-
May sixth,
Yeah,
Mrs. McGoldrick has minutes from May sixth and
Yep.
from June 17th.
yep,
And the minutes from May sixth spoke to the number of students enrolled, the need for, whether or not we had the need for the half-day kindergarten class,
correct,
and the size of the second grade.
yes.
And then on June 17th, we received projections that stated that the incoming kindergarten grade would be higher than the current second grade. At this time, there were 5 kindergarten teachers.
So the decision had been made at that point.
Right, June 17th, the decision had been made.
I don't, different kindergarten had 99 at that time. And the decision was made to keep 5, and we had the rest of June, July, and August for enrollments, meaning that we would absolutely go beyond the 20, which has been the stated philosophy of the school committee, the superintendent, principal count as well, that 20 is that's the number that they try to keep under, which we as new parents, right, many of us are new parents to the district. And we looked at stuff, we looked at the Our Town meeting with Superintendent Cataldo when she was here. We wanted to know what the schools were like. And there is an absolute commitment by our school committee, by the superintendent, by the principals to keep actually Osgood, K through 2, below 20. So it's a commitment that you've made. And the only thing that we're asking is to better align the rhetoric with the reality of the classrooms. And what we're seeing here is in 3rd grade with the MCAS scores making a dramatic decline since 2012 in these areas. We're worried about that. Now, we can't say that that's causal, but I wonder what the other mechanisms could be. Are our teachers getting worse? I absolutely don't think that's it. Are our students not smarter? I absolutely don't think that's it. So it's trying to figure out what's having that impact. And classroom size is right, on a national and local level has been a priority because it allows teachers to teach instead of behaviorally manage children. And that's what we want to give them. We want them in the classroom so that they can teach. And anecdotally, coming from your teachers at least, they talk about how much more they can do in their classrooms with smaller classroom sizes. And that's, we love what you all are saying. We think that it aligns with our philosophy for our children. So we'll put it there. We know that it's been out there. We want to try to meet that benchmark that you've put out in E-SAFE.
So, I guess we ask for your help as we go through this budget process. We ask for all of you to be at town meeting, and to stay involved. The honest answer is that you saw the budget gap that we're facing this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So in fiscal year 2015, there was a $290,509 left over at the end of the year.
Yep.
Mhm.
And that money was used to prepay special ed and
Right.
out-of-district tuition. So when there's leftover money,
Mhm.
does it 100% have to go towards repayment of that, or could some of that money be held for years where we have, so it all
No.
has to be
That
spent?
legally, there are only certain things that you can only prepay: sped tuition
And supplies.
and supplies. Those are the only 2 lines that you are legally allowed to prepay.
So with that extra money, or those, it couldn't just stay in a revolving
No,
account
There's
to
no
cover?
ability, no. So
No,
we
if
have.
we chose not to prepay that money and there was $290,000
town.
for round numbers, we have to give it back to the town.
So we get a lot of pressure every year, from advisory committee and,
Not to have money left over.
to literally to take that prepaid money and return it to the town. So
Yeah.
on the town side, if the fire department or the DPW, and again, budgeting with, a 3% excess, which is that $300,000 or $400,000 that the schools have had, is from my perspective, good budgeting. You don't wanna budget so you have a 3% deficit, but you also don't wanna have, 10% overages. So we've been in the range of 3%, delta, but if you're on the town side in the fire department, and you have $100,000, that you've landed out not using for whatever reason, you had budgeted, additional overtime for your police and you landed out not using it, that $100,000 gets automatically turned back to the town and goes into free cash flow. So last year, we generated $1 million in free cash flow, and $200,000 was from turnbacks from our town department. We do get pressure to turn back the money, and there have been years where there's been a town need.
There were 2 years since I've been on the school committee, 2 years that we turned back $100,000 each year.
But historically, the school committee has chosen to take that excess and prepay prepay supplies or special ed tuitions.
And actually, excuse me for interrupting, the prepayment of supplies has decreased. The amount has decreased as our sped costs have crept up. And because we feel we're very vulnerable on special education tuitions. So it's very fiscally prudent.
So the only way that we
To
can
prepay
create,
that.
the only way that we can create what I consider kind of a savings account that gives us a buffer when it comes to our single biggest variable, which is our out-of-district placements. I mean, with salaries, we generally know, we know our head count, we know salary ranges, and we can get pretty close. But when it comes to out-of-district placements, you can have a student that's moved from in-district to out-of-district. You can have a student that's moved from a collaborative out-of-district. You can have people move in. You can have people move in from out of state. And what we're talking about in terms of impacts is that, you know, a collaborative placement could be $40,000. An out-of-district 200-day placement is probably $100,000. But if it's a 365, it's $200,000. So part of the reason that we prepay that sped is, you know, it was $290,000, I think, for this year.
290, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
one out-of-district placement that's not anticipated, and something else. And so that's how that's how historically the school committee has protected itself and created a cushion.
We're also responsible for making sure that students who are in residential, not residential, commutable, we're responsible for their transportation to and from. You know, all of that eats into pieces of the budget that, you know, we can't cover if we don't have that prepaid, the prepaid special ed line item.
So unfortunately, that can't be held over for unanticipated operating expenses. There's not a mechanism under municipal finance. And on the town side, as I said, they do turn back to free cash flow. When we have free cash flow at year end, our financial management policies, and it may also be municipal finance, that $1 million in free cash flow can't be used for operating expenses. It has to go into a fund or a one-time expense. So you basically, whatever free cash flow you generate has to go into effectively what is a savings account. And the savings accounts that the town has created for itself are a general stabilization fund to help us with unanticipated, you know, snow, whatever, a capital stabilization fund and an OPEB stabilization fund. And if you hadn't had the pleasure of reading about our OPEB liability and the overhang that that's creating for our community, that is something that the Board of Selectmen and other committees have really are looking to begin to fund in small chunks. And capital stabilization is another one that they're trying to rebuild. If you look back 5 or 6 years ago, there was a time when they were only spending $200,000 on capital budget. We're now back to the point where we can actually spend $1 million in capital budget, but we've got 10 or 20 years of needs that haven't been addressed. And so even though we're spending $1 million in capital budget every year, there's $4 or $5 million of requests that come to that committee to be funded on an annual basis, and they have to prioritize. And they'll catch up over time, but we can only do that by funding that out of free cash flow and continuing to fund that stabilization account. And schools do benefit through capital budget.
I was just going to say that,
Yeah.
you know, the school bus lease and
Digital learning.
security cameras,
Mhm.
kitchen equipment. You know, when the oven breaks and we've got 300 students or 400 students in a building who need school lunch, you know, we we can't just go and spend thousands of dollars on an oven, so we have to request that in advance. There are many, many ways that they share the costs from the capital stabilization fund with us. Barbara?
Sorry, can I switch the subject a little bit?
No. To what?
I just wanted to go back into the topic a little bit, just to say that this is a topic I've definitely been, following closely. I have a second grader, a kindergartner, and out-of-district fourth grader. And there's been all sorts of, different changes, in terms of class sizes, from a very large number to an unexpected increase from grade K to grade 1 of 20 kids. What do you do? When do you do it? That kind of thing. So I think we definitely need to have a systematic approach to what do we do if a class that's slated for 24 kids adds 30 kids over the summer? Do you just keep the 6 teachers if there's, this is not gonna happen, it never has happened, but just theoretically, what do you do? So, I think these are questions that we definitely have to look at. As I've wanted to advocate, I do value small class sizes. Do I think it's everything in education? A smaller size makes better? Not necessarily. I know that administrators do look at the composition when they're, of the students, like who needs support. Do we really need an extra teacher for this particular group? Some have really high needs, some can do okay with the higher class sizes, so I do know the administrators look at all of that and communicate that to us. I know there's also classes, every district, I did a comparison of what we use as peer district to find out what the class sizes were on average per each grade level and overall as a district K to 5. And often there's usually one class that's, bumps up to that 23, 24, and you can't change the whole structure of the school just to meet the needs of that one grouping every year. Maybe sometimes you can move it along, maybe you can't, but is it gonna totally disrupt things? That's a consideration they have to take. And just for reference, from what I found out from making calls to the superintendents or assistant superintendents of all these districts, we're pretty similar to Hingham in our average K to 5 class sizes. They're a little bit bigger by 0.1. I think they're 21.2, we're 21.18. Duxbury's 20.8, Sherborne is 20.1, Dover, your best district, Dover, Sherborne, best district apparently. In the state, according to many metrics, is 20.6, this is K to 5 averages. Norwell's 19.8, Hull 18.6, and Harvard 18.3, and Harvard's on a very decreasing enrollment, so their class sizes are going down and they haven't cut teachers yet. But that's the kind of the range you're looking at. I think to the point of, I do agree that the demands on young children academically have increased significantly. It's something I'm definitely concerned with and looking at. The testing that is coming in from the park is more reading based, so you're not going to be able to do well if you're not a strong reader. CPAC just sent an interesting article, actually Ann Demick sent it out from UNESCO, and about how you talk about developmental delays in reading, and I'm sure you can find an article or a survey or a research paper that says the contradicting thing, but it's generally accepted that if you're not a competent reader by grade 3, it gets very, very difficult. That's pretty much accepted across the board. This one is saying where there's developmental differences in students, and there's been a belief saying, well, these kids can catch up. It's developmental, they catch up. This study is actually saying it's rare that you actually see those students catch up. Some will, but not without very targeted support. You're not seeing as much of that happening. And that they've tracked kids from grade 1. So again, this is where I go back to looking at those lower elementary levels. They have to be supported. They have to have really strong reading instruction, or you're gonna pay for it the rest of the way. And also, I do college counseling. I'm looking at what's happening to the testing that's coming in, and those are also getting more reading based. And if you look at a recent New York Times editorial about how can your students do well on that SAT, guess what it says? If you are not a strong reader, you are not going to do well on these tests. So I think when we talk about kindergarten and first grade, I think it's relevant to what happens when you're applying for college. You've got to be able to read. And you can't just make up for it in 4th grade or 6th grade or 9th have these discussions, and it, you know, it's not that we're not considering a lot of these issues, it's also trying to balance it with, in this whole larger context. I'm very happy to see so many people here. I've been trying to learn over the last several years, you know, what are the crucial needs of the town, and as Katie said, I think the town's been great at working with the schools right now in terms of trying to help us meet what we see as our needs. And as Katie said, also getting involved in expressing expressing your desires is an important thing, because that's how democracy works, and it's competing interests, and I think we all know how interests get what they want.
And that's how small town government works too. You know, it's the voice of the people. Yes.
Megan Morisky. I just have another question about next year and the funding for the kindergarten. I know that you said that you definitely have 6 teachers in place. Do we know yet, is there going to be a half day? And also in regards to this year, how the day looks for the kindergarten kids, you know, how is the day structured with curriculum so that, you know, the half day kids that are there, I guess for the full day kids, how has it changed their schedule? Is everybody getting a specialist in the morning, or is it instruction based?
I'm not in the building, so
We'll
Mr.
Bob
McCall
answer
would be
that.
the point person on that.
So not all of our, all of our students have access to specialists, first of all. And that requires, because some of our students leave at noon time, a few, but some do, we do those specials in the morning for those classes. Students that didn't have, classrooms that didn't have students leaving in the morning, we did some specials in the afternoon. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. So now, just thinking about the afternoon for the kids who are in a classroom with children leaving, so they have their specialists, so all their specialists
In the morning.
and all their core curriculum in the morning, and then in the afternoon, it's enrichment. So they're in the classroom 5 afternoons.
Well, one of the other things we did, we just had this discussion a couple of minutes ago, a little while ago now, with some folks. We moved their lunch to later, so that they would have a later lunch and a later recess, so that there would be a movement time in the afternoon for them, because they do need to move it. But to answer your question about curriculum, for all of our half-day students, yes, we work on that curriculum in the morning, but then for some other classes, we can still do some in the afternoon as well.
And so for next year, is the plan to do something similar, keep the half-day option available, or is that not being discussed yet? Is it going to be?
We legally have to offer a half-day option.
Okay, that's what I thought you legally
Yes.
had to. And so the state is still reviewing, and we don't know what their time is for giving us a timeframe for when maybe they'll change that option. Is that?
To require a
To
full day.
require
full day
It
now.
could be
Like a
18
year,
months
2
from now,
years?
it could
Okay.
be.
Could be
4
4 years.
from now.
Okay, so for
9
next
months.
year, the schedule will probably be similar, for across the board. So there'll be the
It's-
option for the half day, and then those children will be in the full day children.
It's hard to say.
Depending on the numbers.
I think it's not, cohort-driven numbers,
Mhm.
I think will help make that decision.
Okay.
If it were similar to what we have this year, it wouldn't change much. If there is a lot of people who are interested in a half-day program, then it may change. There may be a group of students, you're raising what will become a discussion if that happens.
There was a time, literally 3 or 4 years ago, where half day, and in part it was teacher driven, was the most popular class. In fact, it was 20 students
years
because
ago.
people wanted that half day teacher. And you could guarantee a teacher, because we knew who was gonna be the half day teacher. And so it was a very, very popular option. This is the first year where it was not a popular option, very candidly. Every other year, it's been either subscribed at 15 or oversubscribed at 20.
There's only 2 years out of the last, not including this year, but prior to that 9, where it was kind of sort of like more than 5 off from the full day class
Yeah.
sizes. But otherwise, they were the same or more.
And that was based on parents choosing. So this year, parents chose in a very different manner than they have since it was since full day was established in 2006, 2007.
You have percent looking for us. So is it budgeted for 6 full day kindergarten teachers then?
Yes.
Or 5.5?
6.
So it is, the budget is for 6.
It is 6.
And this, and what we, since you were at the meeting last night, so the book that we reviewed should be posted today?
I don't think we posted because Dave was so sick, so it'll
Okay.
probably be posted tomorrow in fairness.
Okay, so all that is on there, just in terms of this is familiar from last year's budget book, but all of that is in there.
Right. For all of you who were there last night, you know how sick poor Dave was. Well, he was worse today, so we said go home. So tomorrow, please.
Yes.
Hi, Deb Kinley, 84 Old Pasture Road. Can we talk a little bit about enrollment and how enrollment is being tracked? And, you know, as some of us parents have been watching school committee meetings that have occurred over the last 2 years, 2 years, excuse me, we've seen it come up again and again, the same questions about tracking enrollment, class size, requests for spreadsheets. And I just would like to hear from the school committee, really what is your protocol for tracking enrollment and class size so that we don't have to do this again? Because it seems to be what happens is that after the budget gets passed in March, and in, you know, in this situation, the class size was established for 18. We were thinking that it was gonna be 18. And then what happens every year, and not just in kindergarten, and because of what's been happening in the town in terms of growth, so many kids are moving into the district over the summer. So I think what happens from March to August is where things are getting sketchy. And is it reasonable going forward to request that every time you are given updates on enrollment numbers, you have in front of you a spreadsheet on every grade? It's easy to do K through 5. It's done in other districts for the middle school. You have in front of you a spreadsheet on what the class size is, so that when the superintendent gives you an enrollment update, you're looking at class size and and so you would have known over the summer that this kindergarten class was going up and up as more kids were added to the district in July, and then 3 more in August. That's how we got to that one class size of 23. So going forward, we talk about the bigger picture, which is another discussion about establishing a class size policy, but at this point, going forward with this budget process for fiscal year 17, every time after the March budget is passed, to track things more closely, is it reasonable for you to always have that class size number in front of you so that you can say, wait a minute, we're getting to a number that we think is a little high? What does our support staff look like? What is this what we want? Because I just don't think that conversation happened over the summer, and that's why we're here.
The school committee has requested over the last year to receive an enrollment update. We get an enrollment update monthly in our packets. So we do get those numbers. As far as tracking it, the business office tracks the enrollment when people register their children in school. So if you've probably noticed in the local newspaper, the pleas for people to please come and enroll your children. Enrollment is open. There was just a blurb in the Mariner, I think it was last week, about projections for next year. So we do everything that we can, short of knocking on people's doors and saying, do you have children here?
And we absolutely understand that, and
think we just keep coming back to the same situation year after year, where in the summer, these parents have to get together and lobby for, an additional teacher, which happened already for that first grade cohort. And I guess as parents, we want we wanna have the confidence that it's not gonna come from us, it's going to come from the school committee, following and tracking those numbers and saying, oh, we're at a place where these numbers are getting to a point where we're not comfortable. And if you look at the higher performing districts, and I'm talking really high, the towns, you like to benchmark yourself a lot against Weston. Another district that I was looking at was Lincoln, which is usually number 1 in the state. Those are the 2 towns in particular, that have an established cross-size policy. And they really adhere to that, they try to adhere the best they can to that policy. And it's obviously worked for their district. They do phenomenal. And I think that we are still in a situation where the class size that kind of comes up year to year seems to be more of a subjective decision than an objective decision. And I know establishing a class size policy is a big thing to take on and would take some time, but this same conversation just keeps coming up again and again. So can you just give me some feedback on your feelings on tracking enrollment? How do you feel about having that always in front of you, or someone, when you're given enrollment numbers, you're also given an update from the schools on what the class size looks like, so that from March to August, there's no surprise.
Yeah. Okay. Ellen, can maybe answer this?
I think it's a great idea, and I think that based on the history over the last couple of years, that I don't think it would hurt for us every time we got an enrollment update to have the number of teachers by grade level and the math done. I mean, I can do in my head 1,200 divided by 20, but that's not the same thing. I think what you're asking for is for us to see on a piece of paper, with every enrollment update, how many sections and what that average class size is, so that when the budget is certified in March, we see it in April, we see it in May, we see it in June, we see it every time the enrollment is updated, our average class size is updated. And I think that's what you're asking for. And I think that would be a terrific thing for us to have.
Right, but you also have to keep in the back of your mind that the budget's certified and voted in the spring. We don't know what's going to happen over the summer. There's no possible way for us, I mean, we already have planned on X number of students with X number of teachers for X amount of money, and there's no way really for us to get more money to add, say, 3 teachers without taking it from something else.
Well, I guess what I'm saying in terms of this kindergarten class, knowing that over the summer these numbers have been growing, could we have been more conservative in terms of not so quickly dropping that teacher?
I don't think so. There was just no money left. The money was appropriated for every teacher that we had in this district.
Sorry, Bianca Bersani, 44 cents. It was budgeted, it was in the budget. When the official budget that was passed was for 5.5 kindergarten teachers. So the money was there. It was taken away to use for another grade, and we don't even know if that was Osgood or not. But the money was actually appropriated in the final budget for that kindergarten.
But we also added a special education teacher that we didn't intend on and utilized the money to service kids.
What about the amount in the kindergarten account?
Yeah,
The
we have the
kindergarten
tuition, we
account.
pay tuition, we have the special grant. I mean, there's so many extra funds that go into kindergarten. That's why I think kindergarten is just the exemplar of what's going on in the other classrooms. So kindergarten isn't just held to the operating budget. It actually has quote-unquote extra funds coming into it to make it work right. You've got all these preschoolers that are coming up. We just had this whole conversation about the preschool program, and that transition is so tough for those children. Well, that's kindergarten. That's what's happening there. And now we were okay with the large class, even after you guys, it was appropriated in the budget. The money was there, and it was taken away. So this is an instance where money was actually taken away.
One of the things I understand what you're saying, and yes, we do. Ideally, if we had our way, we would like to have all our kindergarten classes each year with 16. A couple of things to consider, and I know Mr. McCown and I have had this conversation over years. You have a finite number of rooms in Osgood. If we do that, unfortunately, our children are gonna have to be educated in the back, in the yard, because we'll run out of rooms. But the second issue is that the half-time teacher that was out of that budget, that was half the salary. There was no other salary to add in for a full-time teacher, Bianca.
But she was a senior salaried faculty, so if you take her at what the senior salary went out at most recently, which is about 97, and you cut that in half, that's essentially the cost that what you were saying in MA, what is it, 3-point salaried professional comes in at. So you could have gotten a brand new MA, 3 years out, to come in full-time for what you were paying a half-time senior salary.
She wasn't a senior, she
Well, I'm
wasn't,
just
she was
using-
late to the field in fairness, so.
Hypothetically,
Okay, but late to the
right?
field.
But it's not, I'm not saying that you
Yeah.
can, it's not 100% shift, and right now, there's an open classroom, right? There are 6
Mhm.
classrooms for the kindergarten, so we're not pushing them out into the playground this year.
Right.
They would have been in the empty classroom. So we're not at that extreme, there actually is the space and capacity and budgeting and resources that were not used.
So, yes, and so the other piece to think about is that we had 3 half-day students
Mhm.
committed.
I think it was 6.
Well, 6, but we now have 3, but we had 6. We
Right.
could not conceivably run a program for 6 students.
And I don't disagree with that, yeah, absolutely.
And that's where we evolved from.
But there
But those
was,
students didn't,
go, no,
Ann
go,
Gallagher, those students didn't disappear, they became full-day students who then paid tuition.
Not all, but yes, you're right,
But
some did.
they didn't disappear and not come, they added to the class size and the demand.
If you're looking, I guess of it, you know, I'm certainly hearing the concerns, and I'm not in any way suggesting they're not important. I've been a parent of young children as well, so I definitely respect, and actually, I'm happy that you're all here tonight, because it's very hard for us to make decisions sometimes. We are working in a vacuum to some degree, and if you think that we go in a room and we throw darts and say, well, if it runs in the red circle, we'll do this, or if it runs in the blue circle, we do that. That's not at all what we do. But to hear your voices is very, very important for us tonight. So I really do appreciate that you've come together, because I know there's been a few voices we've heard, but we haven't seen all of you, and I'm really pleased that we do get to see all of you, and I hope we get to see you again if there's more concerns. I'll be right there, I promise. But the point is, we make decisions that we absolutely positively believe are in the best interest of our students. And you have certainly brought it to our attention that this is not a satisfactory outcome. Can we all agree to that? That this is how you're feeling? I don't want to in any way assume I've misunderstood. That being the case, you've asked us, from what I can understand, to go back to the drawing board and reconsider how we're distributing our funds in order to develop some kind of mechanism year over year over year that will assure you and give confidence in the district, as well as in me, because I run the district, but give confidence in the district and give confidence in the committee and give confidence in this town that you can go home in the summer and be confident that you won't come back and find 40 students in your classroom. That is what I'm hearing from you, correct? That being the case, I would ask respectfully that you would allow me to go back with the administration and certainly work with the committee further in developing that mechanism. I don't have an answer for you tonight, in fairness. The administration isn't here. My business manager is home quite sick and didn't want to disperse the germs to any of you. But I agree that it is a logical discussion to have, and I'm sure the committee's been saying that we do have to acknowledge that there's a finite pool of money, and we have to decide where we have some more give and take that we have to do. And what I'm hearing from you is you're asking us to go back to the drawing board and reconsider it and find that mechanism. And all I can say is then you will have to give us some time to do that, because I don't have an answer for you tonight. I apologize that this has been a source of consternation this year. That was never our intention when we made these decisions. We truly believe that we were making them in the best interest of our students. We did not feel that the students in any way would not be appropriately educated in the classes that they're in. I trust empirically every single teacher there. If my children were younger and I could bring them to the district, they're not, they're all grown up. But if they could, I would put them in any one of those classrooms and not be concerned. I would be confident that they would be coming out being solid learners. But I do recognize that this is not a mechanism that you're comfortable with, and that we have to go back and do some refining. Is that
correct.
fair?
And I just wanna put out there, I think that we are all extremely satisfied with the teachers. We think that they're stellar. We think that they could do so much more. And I think that's where we're at, is that we're not allowing them to reach their full potential with our children because they're busy doing things that they shouldn't be doing. We did include in the packet, I'm sure that you've seen, we have found Weston is one of those places that is so transparent. Every year, tracking things longitudinally with their class policy, and it filters into the budget. So we picked out some of those pages that we thought were most helpful, but there's also a link, and so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? There are places out there that are just stellar in terms of tracking
Well,
this.
the good news is their new superintendent was my old superintendent, and we're very close friends. So that would be an excellent, as I would say. But I don't wanna take from what Mrs. Stino wants, but I do know there was a hand in the back, and I don't wanna be disrespectful, so I'll
Right,
leave it in
and-
your.
Okay, I'll take one more comment from the audience. Mrs. Stefan has a comment, and then Mrs. McGoldrick will wrap up, okay?
Sure. Eric Spear, 15 Woodway. So for me, this is a repeat of last year when we discussed budgets around a second grade teacher. And yes, I think everything's been well articulated, and you've actually captured the spirit of the whole thing. Last year, when I sat in the seat over there, I asked the question to the prior board, how do you do your budgets? Do you budget to the exact number, or do you budget to scenarios? So for example, past performance is an indication of future performance. So for the last 3 years, if we had a budget of 100 students, yet 10 more folks came through the summer, there was now a buck 10 that we had to, that wasn't in the actual budget number for it. I run a software company. I do this for a $40 million CapEx budget every year. I plan for the conservative scenarios A, B, C, and D. And so when my CEO comes to me and says, you know, hey, we're gonna bring a book of business to the table that we weren't expecting, how do you plan for it? And I've got some scenarios. They're you know, like this, but it's better than nothing. So if we keep saying, and I've heard it twice now, this year and last year, that, well, people just come in the summer and don't register. Let's be honest, why did people come to Cohasset? It's to raise families. People don't come here to retire, it's too damn expensive. They don't come here to be single. We're 40 miles from any place cool. Right? We come here to raise children and chickens. That's it.
Do you have chickens?
So the priority around scenario planning, that people, listen, I was a North Shore guy, moved to Quincy, came to the prom sign, came to Cohasset. All right, very happy here. I've got 3 wonderful kids and an amazing wife. I'm here for a particular reason. If I didn't have the kids, I wouldn't be here. And our property values, my house has gone up, and everything's great and toasty, but it's people come into my neighborhood off of Brewster with a bun in the oven or 2 behind, and it's the same wash, rinse, repeat cycle here. And if we don't get ahead of this, as far as planning in different scenarios, it'll be the same conversation next year. Well, more people came in, we didn't expect it, we didn't build a scenario around it, we weren't prepared. What I've done, asking for funds in the VC community, is planning for the unexpected. And telling a story that, hey, we think we're gonna have X, but really it's gonna be X plus Y. So I know there's the whole political aspect of selectmen and advisory boards and things like that.
And
but-
limited tax base, but
I understand.
I assure you that we do not take last year's budget and build off of that. We start at 0 each year, and each of the building principals builds their budget based on their perceived needs and our projections and forecasts for enrollment and all kinds of other scenarios that come into play. The unknown is who moves in, who moves out. And we can't control that, and we can't predict
You
it.
gotta take a guess, though. You've
But-
gotta build a scenario.
So here's the thing, unfortunately, we cannot get a range approved, we get a single,
Right, we get a dollar amount,
we get a dollar
and that's what we
amount
have to deal with.
appropriated based on set of assumption. We can't go to town and say, here's a range of scenarios, fund us for this range of scenarios. We get to pick one scenario and that's what gets funded.
So if you planned last year for X and X plus 2% came in,
We own that, we have to solve that.
but what I'm saying is, if you've got a history of that,
So,
put your finger on the scale and build the number.
to understand that,
We have a big number for this year.
so, we do look at, I guess where I'm disagreeing with you is that unfortunately we can't build a range of scenarios and ask for funding around a range. We have to pick a single scenario and ask for funding around that single scenario. Do we look at history and trends and try and guess what is the best scenario in terms of enrollment? Absolutely. But we can only pick one scenario in terms of how we fund it.
I guess my comment is the scenario we're perhaps choosing is the wrong scenario. It needs to be more heavily weighted.
And then what do we do if we have extra money? We give it back at the end of the year?
That's classic business 101 is that you
But,
give
but
money
that's,
back.
see, that's the difference. Municipal finance is different from private.
I
It's
guarantee you can
just
spend the money.
different.
I guarantee you can spend
Well, the problem is we can't, anyway, I hear what you're saying in
Yeah.
terms of.
No, we get it, cause we've all worked in business. We get it.
I wish I could do scenario planning. I wish I could run the models that I ran when I was in investment banking, but the reality is that we have to ask for we have to go to town and ask for a single scenario to be funded. We defend that scenario when we go forward to ask for funding from selectmen, advisory, and the town. You are absolutely right that maybe we have been picking the wrong scenario, or there's something in there to be looked at, but ultimately, we're not able to pick a range. We have to,
All right, don't pick a range and just change the model to be something more liberal with this. Because with the worst case scenarios, if you get too much money, you decrease the class size.
So-
It's a win-win.
so let's be clear, there isn't more, I mean, I'm happy to sit down with anyone and go through the town forecast and kind of what the parameters on that are. But the reality is that we can't just go in and ask for cushion, because the town doesn't have that to give without going in the direction of asking for an override. And I will tell you, I honestly don't see an override happening at this particular juncture. I'm not saying that it won't happen down the road, but it's not gonna happen for this fiscal cycle.
I think I have a wrapping up topic.
Well, Mary has some too,
Oh,
so
okay.
if you want.
So just going back to kindergarten specifically, I think we are tracking, I think we do look at enrollment changes, historic changes percentage-wise year or year, so we have some clue. You can just have these wacky years though, so it can get crazy. But yes, we do track like an average year to year what's changing. So going back to the kindergarten though, I was just gonna say, I mean, some districts do a lottery. Some districts say by X date, that's it, full day's full, sorry folks, you missed it, too bad. You moved into town, we are so sorry, but a half day is all we have, and that's all we're legally mandated to offer you. If something opens, we'll let you know, maybe we'll do a lottery for that, or you could get on a wait list, so.
And we have talked about that.
Some districts do it, some don't, maybe Cohasset's a very accommodating place, maybe parents are so difficult that schools are like, we're not dealing with that, who knows, I don't know, I'm just throwing guesses out there, but there are ways you can put a cap on the full day kindergarten, but those, I mean, could have been, it hasn't really been a huge issue last year. It turned into become the problem that maybe that if we're seeing the full days fill up like that and the full half day only has 6 kids and it's April, maybe that's what you do. So that's just maybe a solution to deal with the kindergarten, which is the hardest to predict and has the most guesswork in terms of enrollment and figuring out staffing.
So if we had allocated until 8 o'clock for the meeting, and it's a little after 8, and we do have an executive session. Just one second.
Do we need to wrap up if people have more questions though?
We have an executive session, then we need to get to that. So, I mean, that's up to the chair, but,
I think we do need to wrap up. We could probably talk about this until 11 o'clock and still continue to go around and around. I think that I would invite you to come to the next several meetings when we're talking about the budgeting. We will talk about class size, we will talk about projections for what's needed in all the schools in the district. Go to the selectmen's meeting. Dr. Schubert's back there shaking his head yes. He always advocates for the schools. He was on the school committee for 2 sessions. So, get involved. Get your parents to come out at town meeting and for the election. We have a very seasoned community of people who've been here for many, many years who are done with the schools. You know, if that comment makes me unpopular, that's just the way it is. The young parents quite often have conflicts on election day and on town meeting day and don't come out, and the senior citizens do. And that works against the schools.
There's 2 seats open on the Board of Selectmen, honestly, and there are 3 openings on the school committee. So, school-age children, parents with school-age children on the Board of Selectmen.
That would be
absolutely
huge.
Be huge. Well, and it'll be down to just
It'll
one.
be down to one in a couple of months.
In a couple months.
So, okay, so, Mary will wrap up, and I apologize. I'd love to keep going, but, and this is exactly why I suggested that we have a regular school committee meeting that was not mixed in with the regular agenda, because we were already here until after 10 o'clock last night. The meeting before that went till 11:30. So I wanted to make sure that you were heard, that, you know, we could have some give and take and conversation around all of this. And we're happy to continue the conversation in a different format.
So on behalf of everybody, thank you very much for coming out and not eating your dinner or having grilled cheese.
And some of you 2 nights in a row, thank you.
So just a couple things I'd like to wrap up on. There's clearly some action items that we've already undertaken and we can undertake without, you know, too much pain on anybody's part. The ESPs have been chosen, and that's terrific. One will show up next week, one a few weeks after that in the classroom. It is very easy for us, and I think that's a great idea in terms of when we get our enrollment projections to look at that section by section and class size, so that we're able to make those determinations. That can happen very easily for us. Something else we can also look at, and Jean and I sit on the policy subcommittee, and I've already pulled any policies that might exist in our benchmarking districts that we look at. That's gonna have to be a discussion that we have, and perhaps at some point we'll ask for more input from you as well. Getting back into the importance of just getting involved and going to the selectmen meeting. Our proposed budget that we looked at last night is $689,000 over what the town is allocating to us right now.
That's a lot of salaries.
That's important, and it will ebb and flow over the next 6 weeks, 2 months. But stay as involved as you are right now, I guess I would say, and it's not just our meetings that would be helpful for you to attend. So, and that's it, and thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lamar.
Thank you.
You got, did you show them?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I hope that the rest of the audience are
You know what, and it is about getting, I'm not, I'm going to. It is about getting caught. I don't have that fight. And we're get out of the population. Oh, show up and so.
If this population stays just as involved and becomes, and they're a lot more educated than they were about the process a month ago.
They certainly are.
You know what, they both be right out of here.
Only good things happen.
You know?
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Well, you know, I had 2 thoughts that I didn't really want to vet. Oh, I